Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. I've recently heard a number of individuals who have gone from the Democratic Party and have either registered independent or even Republican. And the reason for that is, well, what they say in their words is basically, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. The Democratic Party has taken a very hard left in recent years. And so those that were semi-moderate have felt like they just aren't even being represented at all within the Democratic Party. You're either a far leftist to be a Democrat now, or you are definitely on the outs. And so I have done a number of podcasts recently kind of showing what the Democratic Party is now. What are their issues? What are you voting for when you vote the Democratic ticket? And I came across a number of articles recently that kind of illustrated this. Like, for instance, if you want to know what the Democratic Party is now, well, they're anti-Israel. A article from Tim Pierce, who writes for the Daily Wire, says that critics across the political spectrum ripped New York City mayoral candidate Zoran Mamdani on Tuesday for a statement commemorating the second anniversary of the October 7th terror attack on Israel. Mamdani posted a statement on his X account on Tuesday that reflects on the attack that marked the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. After commemorating the horrific war crime, the self-described democratic socialist dedicated most of his statement to condemning Israel for perpetrating a genocide in Gaza, citing fatality numbers from Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. Quote, in the aftermath of that day, Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli government launched a genocidal war, a death toll that now far exceeds 67,000, with the Israeli military bombing homes, hospitals, and schools into rubble. This is what Mamdani said. And without noting that, of course, Hamas often uses civilian buildings for military functions, in which case those buildings become legitimate military targets under international law. Quote, every day in Gaza has become a place where grief itself has run out of language. I mourn these lives and pray for the families that have been shattered. Our government has been complicit throughout all of it, he continued. This must end. The occupation and apartheid must end. Peace must be pursued through democracy, not war crimes, and our government must act to end these atrocities and hold those responsible to account, unquote. Well, the statement drew backlash from the right and the left, actually. Dan McLaughlin, a senior writer for the National Review, was one of many who accused Mamdani of victim blaming. He said that if Israel's war in response to being invaded is genocidal, then most of the wars fought in the past century would meet that standard on the part of most of the combatants, even those resisting the conquest of their country and the enslavement of extinction of their people, said McLaughlin. MSNBC columnist Michael Cohen hit Mamdani as well, saying that on the second anniversary of October 7th, one anecdote sentence on how murdering Jews is bad and the rest is yet another seedy, pejorative attack on Israel. Dan Frum is a writer at The Atlantic, which again is no no friend of the conservative, posted, this is a genuinely useful statement. The chilling formulaic language about the 10/7 atrocity, the intense, angry passion of the about the Israel's self-defense, together they arrestingly reveal that the author cares about and who he does not care about. GOP Representative Mike Lawler, or Lawler, I guess is how you pronounce that, of New York, said that not only should Mamdani's statement disqualify him to run for mayor, but that anyone who endorses the Democratic candidate should be out of American politics. Mamdani has gained support from notable Democrats such as Senator Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and New York Governor Kathy Hochul. Quote, this statement is beyond disqualifying. Anyone who endorses him for mayor is completely unqualified to. This is what, again, Lawler posted. He said, any New York Democrat who supports this insanity needs to be defeated at the ballot box. Mamdani's statement earned reproach from Israeli Foreign Ministry as well, saying, quote, 2 years after Hamas launched a barbaric massacre against Israel and the Jewish people, Mamdani has chosen to act as a mouthpiece for Hamas propaganda, spreading Hamas's fake genocidal campaign. And this is what the ministry response said. By repeating Hamas's lies, he excuses terror and normalizes anti-Semitism. He stands with Jews who only when they are dead, and that's shameful. Yeah, and I would say that again, you might say that this is just an outlier. You know, Mamdani's kind of a loose cannon, whatever the case may be. But New York Governor Kathy Hochul still continues to endorse him. So again, he is the face of the Democratic Party. He is one of the leaders. Okay, let's put it that way. He's one of the leaders of the Democratic Party, and he's being endorsed by other leaders of the Democratic Party. And this is what he said. He's anti-Semitic, anti-Israel. But that's not the only issue. There's the pro-political violence, and we've seen all kinds of stories recently that I could use, I could go to, but this one right here, I don't know if you heard of. We covered it a little bit last Friday, but according to Virginia delegation Carrie Coiner, who's a Republican from Chesterfield in Virginia, this and the still unfolding scandal involving Democratic Attorney General nominee Jay Jones goes deeper than just a few text messages. Coiner, who was the recipient of several 2022 text messages from Jones advocating for the assassination of then State House Speaker Todd Gilbert, said Jones had made similar comments to her back in 2020, where they were discussing the idea of qualified immunity for police officers. Quote, when we had a pretty heated conversation about public policy and pain involving qualified immunity. This is what Coiner told Brandon Jarvis of the Virginia Scope. Quote, I served on the court's committee for a short period of time. A bill to remove qualified immunity for police officers, which protects police officers from personal liability in the line of their duty and their line of work. And he believed that they should not have qualified immunity. And he was trying to convince me to agree with that. I said, no, police officers have to make a split-second decision about whether or not to shoot a gun to protect themselves or protect others. And if they're having to think about, well, will this strip my whole family of everything? Are they going to be able to make that split-second decision? This is what Coiner recalled saying. And she added, and I said, I believe that people will get killed. Police officers will get killed. And he said, well, maybe if a few of them die, that they would move on, not shoot people, not killing people. And I said, that's insane. But this is what the response. This was the response. But he firmly believed. This is what she said. He firmly believed that if you removed qualified immunity, that police officers would act differently. And I firmly believe that it would not result in good public policy, and it would put police officers and the public's lives at risk if they have to second guess themselves on a decision they're making in the moment where someone is doing something violent. Well, Jones came back and said, "Who did uh, who did put his name behind legislation ending qualified immunity for police officers did not speak directly to the Virginia scope, but provided a statement claiming that he had never said anything of the kind. Quote, I did not say this. I have never believed and do not believe that any harm should come to law enforcement, period. Every single day, police officers put their lives on the line and protect the community. I'm deeply grateful for their service and sacrifice. As Attorney General, I will work hard hand in hand, and yada, 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 right? And so you see that, here's a guy who not only thought that police should die so that maybe they would think more like him. He also, again, just like we covered, talked about killing and dreaming about, fantasizing about killing his political rivals, including their children. And again, you can go back to Friday's FOMO Friday podcast to hear more about that. But this is a guy who is one of the leaders of the Democratic Party, particularly in his state. If he's elected, Attorney General, he is the head of law enforcement in that state. And guess what? Again, it's not a one-off type of thing. Senator Tim Kaine and a lot of others say that they will support Jay Jones. So again, it's not just one guy and one outlier. This is who the party is. And it's, again, we can look at others like anti-law enforcement. They are anti-law enforcement in many, many ways. Here's another story. Chicago Democratic Mayor Brandon Johnson will create ICE-free zones across the sanctuary city as the Trump administration continues its immigration sweeps while facing an uptick in violence. The Windy City's mayor said during a news conference on Monday that his latest action is focused on reining in, this is how he puts it, reining in this out-of-control administration, unquote. The order establishes ICE-free zones. That means that city property is unwilling private businesses will no longer serve as staging grounds for these raids, Johnson said. Well, the Trump administration commenced Operation Midway Blitz last month with the deployment of additional federal immigration agents in Illinois, resulting in more than 1,000 arrests to date. And in response, anti-ICE agitators have taken to the streets in an attempt to thwart the Trump administration's sweeping deportation operation. Some of those efforts by the agitators have become violent, of course. And last Saturday, Border Patrol agents were rammed by vehicles and boxed in by 10 cars in Broadview, Illinois. Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin talked about this on X. And when the trapped agents exited the car, they encountered one of the alleged attackers, who was later identified as Marimar Martinez. Agents determined that she was armed with a semi-automatic weapon, forcing them to fire defensive shots at the unarmed U.S. citizen, at an unarmed U.S. citizen, according to McLaughlin. And Chicago police officers were also instructed to stand down when the federal agents called for help during the attack. Martinez was previously the subject of a federal law enforcement intelligence bulletin that circulated last week after she was allegedly doxing agents and posting online, "Hey to all the gang, let's f those mfers up. Don't let them take anyone." Just a really nice individual, by the way. In response to the uptick in violent assaults, the Trump administration's Department of War will deploy roughly 400 soldiers from Texas to Chicago and Portland, and is doing so currently, actually. Illinois has since sued Trump administration and it's not just Illinois, Oregon has as well. And so, we'll see what comes of that. It's obviously working its way through the federal courts right now, but again, the whole point here is you have the Democratic Party fighting on the side of terrorism, fighting on the side of violence. They are anti law and order. That's what these ICE agents are trying to do. That's what these National Guard members are trying to do. They're trying to basically keep the law. But Democratic Party leaders are very much against that. Okay, let me give you another. How about injustice? They're on the side of injustice. A man who planned to kill Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh in 2022 in an attempt to change the court's balance of power was sentenced by a Joe Biden-appointed judge on Friday to 97 months in prison, granting the defendant's request for an 8-year sentence. Judge Deborah Boardman, a Joe Biden appointee to the Maryland federal court, acknowledged there was, quote, a whopping 22-year difference between that and the minimum of 30 years called for by the federal sentencing guidelines. Prosecutors had asked for sentencing guidelines to be followed, and they weren't. She knocked off 22 years of the 30-year sentence, or recommendation, let's put it that way, and sentenced to 8 years. The Department of Justice plans to appeal the sentence, and Nicholas Roski traveled from California to Kavanaugh's Maryland home armed with a cache of weapons after a leaked document showed that the court planned to rule against liberals on abortion. Although he had meticulously planned the assassination for months, he had a change of heart outside the conservative justice's home and called the police and turned himself in. He has been detained in the 3 years since, so with time served and good behavior, Roski's sentence would mean that he could be out in 4 years after being sentenced on the charge of attempted assassination of a U.S. justice. The sentence also included lifetime court supervision, and Boardman said, quote, "Under the law, I must consider the sentencing guidelines. The guidelines in this case are 360 months to life. It's important to understand the Supreme Court stance on guidelines. They used to be mandatory, but in a case called Booker, the Supreme Court held that they were advisory. The judge acknowledged that this crime did involve domestic terrorism, but undid most of the terrorism enhancement created by the U.S. Sentence Commission to increase recommendation punishments in terrorism cases. Quote, I have not seen evidence that the Sentencing Commission relied on evidence that it would reduce recidivism. This is what she said. She said, recent research in the Georgetown Law Journal said terrorists are not unequally incapable of being rehabilitated. So she's knocking off 22 years off of a 30-year recommendation, a minimum recommendation of 30 years to life. And this person could be out in 4 years because, well, there's a chance they could be rehabilitated. The sentence took more than 4 hours, with much of the time dedicated to discussing how Roque's transgender identity meant that he should get a lighter sentence. So she writes this whole thing, and because he now identifies as a as a female, oh well, yeah, that's the main reason we should give him a light sentence. His mother, Colleen, told the judge on Friday, quote, "I have attended PFLAG meetings and learned about the LGBTQ plus community. I am committed to going on this journey with Sophie," is what he calls himself now. "She was frustrated with what was going on in the world, and we weren't a safe place to process it." As his mother wept, Nicholas Roski also choked up, and his Adam's apple bobbing up and down things because he was obviously not wanting to see his mom cry. But Boardman said any prison time is punishment for her. This length doesn't need to be particularly long. Unduly harsh conditions make a difference too. So if I get a speeding ticket under this logic, if I get a speeding ticket, it doesn't have to be expensive ticket. I mean, you could just fine me $10, instead of 300 or whatever it is. Just fine me $10. It doesn't have to be exceptionally harsh. The opportunity for me to rehab from speeding or whatever, it's there. So I should just get $10, right? This is the thinking of a federal judge. Earlier in the hearing, Boardman lashed out at prosecutors and President Donald Trump, saying, "Let's not hide the fact that President Trump issued an executive order saying transgender inmates would be assigned to prisons with their biological sex." The prosecutor replied that there was an injunction holding up much of the enforcement of the executive order, and the judge later stated that Roski could, in fact, get hormone replacement in prison, at least while the injunction was in effect. In court, Roski appeared as a tall man with a deep voice, and his online posts show that even as a transgender, he is attracted to women, not cis men. The judge opined about giving a shorter sentence because Roski's transgenderism, even as she said that, thanks to a court injunction, Roski may get female hormones in federal prison. Quote, "With the injunction in place, Ms. Roski could receive gender-affirming care, but if that injunction goes away, she could be denied it. So when I sentence her, I take into account that she is a transgender woman." How does this make any sense whatsoever? How can you saying that you are somebody that you're not, how can that lead you to a shorter sentence? How can that have any effect on the sentencing of what you did, in this case, an attempted murder of a Supreme Court justice and his family because they didn't like what they thought was coming down as a court decision? This, again, is just absolutely incredible, and it's what the Democratic Party holds to. This is what they're supporting. This is a judge that they put on the courts. It's absolutely incredible. In one Reddit post, he before the shooting, it shows that he is one in a string of violent trans-identifying individuals who are obsessed with video games and leftist politics. In one, he said that he was a transgender girl seeking friend. In another, he said that he was seeking daddy to have complete sexual control over me. Still another post said, dating, I'm into androgynous or feminine people who use she, her pronouns, play partners, pretty kinky, have a Fed account and everything. If you are not a cis man, chances are I am interested in playing with you. Like the boyfriend of Tyler Robinson, who allegedly assassinated Charlie Kirk. Roski was apparently a furry. He put out a classified ad calling himself a MTF pet for owner and said that I want to wear nothing but a collar, ears, and a tail plug and communicate only through my body what I want. In one Reddit post, he explained that I am pro-abortion, in favor of aborting fetuses, not pro-choice. He said that all babies should be aborted because they cannot give consent to being born. This would require no deaths of people already in existence. It would simply prevent new people from coming into existence. Over time, resources would become more plentiful. Which would be another benefit of this method, he wrote. On May 20th of 2022, he asked Reddit users, the Roe v. Wade leak has brought a lot of attention to the Supreme Court and what it is capable of. If going into the future, the Supreme Court regains the same numbers, what is a realistic expectation for the future? On the other hand, if a conservative judge were replaced by a liberal judge, thus changing which party has the majority, what would change? The next day, he posted Reddit's forensics form claiming to be a novelist, writing a killer who is obsessed with not leaving evidence. What methods could they use? You see, again, these are this is what is being put into place. These type of judges that would put a sentence, take a minimum sentence of 30 years and reduce it down to time served plus 4 years. This is crazy. This is what they stand for. This is why they're losing people from their party. But again, it's not. I mean, it goes along with pro-child mutilation. Like, for instance, for about 90 minutes on Tuesday, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in a case on a Colorado law that bans counselors from helping gender-confused kids. After the dust had settled, many of the justices, including Justice Samuel Alito, appeared poised to strike down the law after raising questions about free speech and the politicization of science. The case came to the court after Christian counselor Kaylee Childs challenged a Colorado law that bans counseling, thank you, that attempts to or purports to change an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity. Childs argues the law violates her First Amendment rights by preventing her from helping kids with gender identity issues feeling comfortable in their own bodies. Several of the justices appeared sympathetic to her free speech claims. Even notoriously liberal Justice Elena Kagan appeared that way as well. Leading the charge on the free speech criticism was Alito. No shocker there, right? The conservative justice criticized Colorado Solicitor General Sharon Stevenson's argument, noting that the court rejected a similar argument in the 2018 case over a California law mandating crisis pregnancy centers providing information on how to obtain abortions. Alito pressed Stevenson on free speech throughout oral arguments, and at one point presented her with a hypothetical situation. This is what he said, one viewpoint is the viewpoint that a minor should be able to obtain talk therapy to overcome same-sex attraction. If that's what or he or she wants, and the other is the viewpoint that the minor should not be able to obtain talk therapy to overcome the same-sex attraction, even if that is what he or she wants, looks like blatant viewpoint discrimination. In response, of course, Stevenson claimed that she believes both situations would be allowed under the Colorado law because the counselor in those situations would not be looking to change sexual orientation. But unsatisfied with that response, Justice Kagan presented Stevenson with a similar hypothetical, saying that it seemed like viewpoint discrimination in the way that we would normally understand viewpoint discrimination. Chief Justice John Roberts even and Justice Clarence Thomas also raised First Amendment questions. Another telling exchange occurred when Alito pushed Stevenson on the fact that the medical establishment has been wrong in the past, and much of Colorado's argument hinges on studies that purport to show the harms of so-called conversion therapy, which would encompass engaging kids not to embrace a transgender identity. Quote, the medical consensus is usually very reasonable and is very important, Alito said. But have there been times when the medical consensus has been politicized and has been taken over by ideology? And Stevenson replied by saying that she didn't think that was relevant to the case. Crazy. In response, Stevenson said that it would be certainly a concern if the medical standards of care were not based on patient safety, but something else. Another key moment occurred when Alito challenged Colorado's interpretation of the law, and you can see what's going on here. The Supreme Court has not come down with their decision, but it's pretty evident that they are going to not side on the side of the Democratic Party here and try to ban speech, particularly when it comes to counselors, just because they don't like what that speech is. They want to. They are pro child just the transgender community is very entrenched in the Democratic Party. And when you take these little bodies and you lop off breasts and you change all these different things, you make them sterile and all the things that they are very much into, that is where the Democratic Party is today. That you don't find that being supported on the Republican side. And so I wanted to just bring you some of these. There was just seemed to be a slew of stories that just highlighted where the Democratic Party has swerved into. And this is why we're seeing them in a very bad situation. And they are losing members. They are losing people. And they are at some of the lowest. They have some of the lowest numbers when it comes to surveys and what people who people think should be in charge. And I think it's going to go very badly for them in coming elections. But only time will tell. I would love to hear what you think on it. Of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. And of course, you can go to our YouTube page. You can like and share. That always helps. And thank you for listening.
This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.